fellow makers, to this 5-part video series on how to make a knit bunny hat with ear flaps. For this series, you will need a red heart dreamy yarn in the ivory color, knitting needles on a 29-inch cord at 5.5 millimeter size, a yarn needle, scissors, double-pointed needles of the 5.5 millimeter size, a stitch marker, a crochet hook of 5.5 millimeters. The crochet hook is optional. I do show you 2 different methods to add the edging onto the brim of the hat. So if you have a crochet hook, that's awesome. If not, you can also use the double-pointed needles to add the brim on. And another option that I like to use is a row counter. All right, without any ado, let's get started. Welcome to part 1 of the 5-part series on the knit bunny hat with ear flaps. For this, I'm going to be showing you how to make the ear flaps. Okay, and you'll have to make 2. I've made one here. This ear flap is for the 0 to 3 month size. If you would like other sizes for this hat, it is available, and I'll put a link to that down below. All right, so for this you're going to need double-pointed needles, scissors, and your yarn needle, and of course your yarn. And for this pattern I'm using the Red Heart Dreamy yarn in the ivory color. So let's get started. First you're going to leave a slightly long, not too long of a tail, and create a slip knot. I've already got mine done ahead here. And you're going to put that on your double-pointed needle. And these needles are the 5.5 millimeter size. Okay, so we're going to begin with 2 cast-ons. So we've got 1 there with our slip knot. And we're just going to cast on 1 more stitch. Okay, so we have 2. And for our first row, for our first row, we're just going to knit those 2 stitches. So 1, 2. Let's give it a little tug there to make our work nice and neat. Okay. For our next row, I'm going to do an increase, and to increase I'm going to do knit front and back. And I'm going to do that on both of these stitches. So for that, I'm going to first go in the front and knit. Then I'm going to pull up a bit on my yarn so I have some working room to move around in behind and go through the back of the stitch. And just like knitting, grab that yarn, pull it through, and knit through the back. So now I have 2 stitches from that 1. So that's my first increase. We'll do that again. Knitting through the front, pulling up on your yarn, move around to the back, go into the back, grab our yarn, and we knit through the back. So now we end up with 4 stitches. Okay, for every time after an increase round, the next round you just knit those stitches. So for this one, I'm just going to knit those 4 off of my needle. All right, so now is our next increase round. And from now on, for our increase rounds, we're just going to increase on the first stitch and the last stitch. And then these stitches in between, we're just going to knit as usual with no increases. Okay. So knit front, knit through the back. That's our first increase. My yarn wants to split on me a little bit there. Knit those 2 middle ones just regular, and we're going to do our last increase here. So knit through the front and knit through the back. Okay, now we'll end up with 6 stitches. And for our next row, we're just going to knit those off the needle. All right, so now we're on to another increase round or row. You're going to knit through the front, knit through the back. Just knit these stitches here in the middle as usual until you get to the last stitch. And we're going to do another increase here on the last one, so knit in the front and knit through the back. Okay, so then this next row we're just going to knit. We should have 8 now on our needle. So because we just increase on that first and the last stitch, each row, increase row, we're increasing by a count of 2. So now we are up to 8. And for the 0 to 3 month size, you want to make it so that you have 12 on your needle. Okay. And you'll make it so you increase to 12 and then you knit that last row of 12 and then you just snip off your yarn. If you want to continue to follow along with me, that's awesome. Or if you want to zip ahead to the end to see what it looks like at the end and how you snip off, then go ahead and do that. So now I'm on my next increase, so I'm going to knit in front and knit back there. Okay, knitting these middle ones. This yarn is usually really good to work with. I had already worked up a little piece with this one and had to rip it out. And when you do that, it makes it a little more extra fuzzy, I find. So your needles catch on it a little bit. So, all right, so that was an increase. So now there should be 10 on the needle. So I'm just going to knit those off. All right, here's our last increase row for the 0 to 3 month size. So again, on the first one, we'll knit in the front, scooch around, knit through the back, knit these middle ones off. And increase that last stitch. All right, so now we've got it up to 12. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to do one row here of just knitting those 12 off. No increasing or anything, just a regular knit row. There we go. Okay. So here we've got our 12 stitches. As you can see, it just kind of creates a little triangle there for the ear flap. So now all you do is you just take your scissors, leave a little room so at the end, once you've cast this on, you can weave in your ends. Okay, and here I leave this dangler, but I'm going to weave in this end just because when I initially cast on, I've got a lot of ends and everything going on, so it makes it just a little less messy to do it that way. So meet me up at part 2 and I'll show you how to cast on, because we're going to do a cast on with these ear flaps initially, so it's all part of the initial cast on for your hat. All right, we'll see you in part 2.